I wonder why chocolate tastes so good.
Hi guys, so our question of interest this semester was based on chocolate ratings. So we got our data from Kaggle.com, and they're a free resource for data scientists to compete in competitions over different data sets. So we got ours from there, and our specific question of interest pertains to how specific qualities of chocolate like origin, company, details, cocoa percent, and so many more affect consumer ratings. So some example questions are, does chocolate obtain a higher rating when produced by different companies like Colombia or Madagascar? Does higher cocoa percent relate to a higher rating by consumers? Or how does company location affect the chocolate ratings? So after completing this study, the world will recognize what factors contribute to a higher perceived rating of chocolate and where the chocolate is actually coming from.
So the higher the percentage of cocoa in chocolate, the more bitter it tastes. So for chocolate that is considered sweetened, the highest percent of cocoa that can be used is 84%, and normal milk chocolate has only like 10% of cocoa in it. It is interesting that the data shows the most chocolates tested had a cocoa percentage of over 50%. And according to World Atlas, the top 8 countries of cocoa beans are Mexico, Ecuador, Brazil, Cameroon, Nigeria, Indonesia, Ghana, and Cote d'Ivoire. Many of these countries are represented in the data. However, not many companies that sell the chocolate are located near where the beans are harvested.
It's data cleaning time! When first looking at our data, it appeared to be very clean. However, when we looked at it more in depth, it was very difficult to change everything to make it clean for this project. Some of the things we had to change were numerical variables, and then there's a lot of spelling and organizational errors that we had to fix. In our data, we changed the cocoa percent from a percentage to a decimal because the decimal worked better for our data, and then we also changed the rating, the REF, and the review date to numeric data instead of how it was entered.
So when cleaning our data, it was actually a very long and lengthy process. So when we got our data, there were columns that had all character names. So for example, countries had each of the country names spelled out, like France, United States, Ecuador, Colombia, different things like that. And in addition, there are spelling mistakes. So to fix that, what I had to do is go through each column and copy it into a Word document and find the list of countries that was incorporated into the list. Then what I had to do is make sure that there weren't spelling mistakes that were counting countries twice because they were spelled differently. And then I had to make sure each country was represented by a different number, so when we analyzed our data, it was easier to see which country represented what factor. In addition to changing the character columns, we also had to make some columns numeric. So for example, the percentage column had the number and then a percent sign, so we changed that to a decimal. And in addition, the REF, rating, and review date we had to change to be numeric data so we could look at it on graphs easily.
Data analysis.
In order to analyze the data, we first make a box graph about country location and the ratings, but turns out they didn't give much information, so that's why we decided to make them by continents. So we made box plots of continents and their ratings. The 6 continents that we have are Europe, Africa, Asia, Australia, North America, and South America. They had similar ratings but different range in interquartile range. Australia turns out to have the highest mean of 3.45 and has a range of 1.5. However, it has the fewest data points to analyze.
So like we talked about earlier, we wanted to see whether the cocoa percent had an effect on the rating of chocolate, whether it was higher or lower. And what we found that as the cocoa percent went up, the rating went down. And that makes sense in just our everyday life because darker chocolate is more bitter and not as sweet, so people would perceive it as having a lower rating. So we made a scatter plot on that, and we found that it had a relatively significant downward slope on our scatter plots. So next we looked at bean type and rating of chocolate, and we really didn't find much of a comparison here. The line was relatively straight across. So next we looked at REF and ratings of chocolate. And what we found in our scatter plot is that there is a slight upward slope. So REF is the certain number assigned to when the data was taken of the chocolate rating. So what we were hypothesizing because of this is that as the more recent that the data was taken, the more likelihood that the chocolate was better tasting because they've had time to improve it.
Discussion part 1. The biggest factors that we found in relation to the rating of the chocolate were the cocoa percentage in the chocolate and the REF. The highest chocolate we found per rating was in Australia. Regression and trees. When doing the graphs, we didn't find very much information, so we decided to do a regression. We made a testing set and a training set to help us find predictions of chocolate ratings based on different variables. Discussion part 2.
The regression model turned out to be a lot more helpful than the other charts and graphs we made earlier in the project. So we plotted our rounded data, and it looks fairly normally distributed, with most of the ratings being at 3 and spreading out from there. So then we plotted our testing data, and the scatter looks like our data was fairly well predicted. After making a table of our test data, it shows that the most data was around 3.5 and higher, and most chocolate wasn't scored that lowly because it's chocolate. So lastly, we made some trees, and if the cocoa percent was above 0.785, the rating was 0.75 lower than if the chocolate percentage was 0.785 and lower. So the next trees show that predictions for other variables given cocoa percent, and it just shows the other variables that were possible and what predictions came from those.
From running the summary, we found that cocoa percent improved the prediction by 4.95 and continent improved the prediction by 2.06. Our data has shown us many things about chocolate, but mainly that it's more complex than we thought. Many variables play a factor in the rating of chocolate, including cocoa percent, REF, country, and continent.
My favorite chocolate is Hershey's.
My favorite chocolate is milk chocolate Hershey's.
And mine is Reese's.
Cool, thanks.
Uh-oh. Find the predict the rating to help
Earlier in the lab, this is cool, and the
From running the summary, we found that